Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, whichever realms of existence you are, whatever mind states you're in, whatever conditions you're in, you are welcome to my channel. You are welcome to Jodo Shinshu. You are welcome to the ocean of the vow. Immerse yourself in the Dharma. Right. So today, continuing my reflective readings to set the stage for future discussions with Kilcan in my, I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the Bamboo in Daily Life series on the 5 principles that Shinran and Renyo pointed us toward for guidelines for our behavior and conduct in lieu of there being no precepts, because we're Mappo. There's no understanding, true understanding of the precepts. We don't have the capacity to truly and grasp the precepts and what they're really about, and we just don't have the ability to or wisdom or character to apply them to our own lives. So we needed something, and so that's why Shinran and Renyo pointed us toward. Well, I don't presume to know exactly why, but we needed some. The community needed some guidelines. For their conduct. Jodo Shinshu followers needed some guidelines, so they gave the five. They pointed us toward the 5 principles or guidelines, and these basically what they were the 5 principles of Confucianism. Confucian teaching. Now, they weren't teaching. Obviously, Shinran and Renyo were not teaching Confucianism, but they, the Confucian principles of propriety, righteousness, justice, etc., were in the culture. It was just in the culture, strongly in the culture of the time, ingrained in the culture, and these they were just not. I don't think everyone necessarily would even recognize them as Confucian, even within the cultures, but they were guidelines of just decency, how to not be a blank hole, so how to there were the basic human ways to treat people. I can't remember how Confucius put it. Don't do to others what you would not have them do to you, kind of thing. So anyway, so I thought it would be a good idea to actually read a couple of papers that I found on, I already read the introduction to Confucianism paper, and now I'm going to do one on that's focused on the 5 principles themselves and defines them and fleshes them out. So that's without further ado, we'll go into that. But first, I want to do some quick Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namanda Butsu, Nama, Nama, Nama. So yeah. Just share my screen. And the reason I do that in Butsu is not because I necessarily Confucian teachings and deeply have deep respect for that, and actually see Confucius. I'm convinced that Confucius, as well as Lao Tzu, were either Buddhas or bodhisattvas or enlightened beings in disguise, using skillful means to eventually bring people to the Buddha Dharma. So in that sense, yeah, I deeply respect any Taoic tradition, whether it's Confucianism or Tao, philosophical Taoism, naturalistic Taoism, or any of the schools of Taoism. I deeply respect them. But I say Nembutsu more for me and for the not because I'm trying, not because I think this paper or writings of Confucian are sacred in that sense, in terms of the Jodo Shinshu tradition or Buddhism. But obviously, I have deep reverence and respect, though, still. So anyway, right. So, and it's just, I like to start my videos with at least some Nembutsu and end them as well with some Nembutsu, whatever the topic is or discussion or what have you, whatever the format is what I'm trying to say. So, okay, so what I'm reading today is, obviously you can see on screen. I think I will make it a bit bigger for you and for me, quite frankly. So it is Confucius on the 5 Constant Virtues by Robert Joseph C. Wahing, of Modern Asian Thoughts, October 30th, 2021, at the Immaculate Heart of Mary Seminary, Tagbilaran City, Bohol, Philippines. And, we just want to say, disclaimer, I'm not affiliated with the authors or publishers or these organizations mentioned here. I'm simply reading this as fair use for educational purposes, not for profit, not for any agenda or any affiliation with the author or the organizations involved with this paper. So here we go. Now the abstract. Humans by nature are social beings. They tend to connect and relate with one another in spite of the individual differences they possess. As the famous quote of an English poet, John Donne, says, no man is an island. Man should necessarily relate with one another in order to thrive. But bearing in mind the individual differences of human beings, we cannot exclude the possibility of chaos, disorder, and discordance. Indeed we cannot exclude that, especially in these Mapo times, these interesting times that we live in Mapo. That is why in a diverse society, man needs a moral guide in order to achieve a harmonious social life. Man needs to resort to ethical views and principles in order to enrich their nature as social beings. Throughout the history of philosophy, there were various ethical views being introduced by philosophers. One of the great traditions that offered major contribution in the field of ethics was the Chinese or Oriental tradition. Indeed. The most notable philosopher in Chinese thought was Confucius. In this paper, the researcher will investigate the concept of virtue in the light of the Confucian Ren, Yi, Li, Ji, and Xin. These are considered to be the 5 constant virtues of Confucianism. Ren is the virtue of benevolence and humanity. Yi is that of honesty and uprightness. Ji is knowledge and wisdom, Zin is faithfulness and integrity, and Li is propriety, good manners, and worship. Bear with me a minute. The researcher will try to discuss each concept in order to have a better outlook on Confucian ethics. These virtues serve as the basis in developing a harmonious society and good government. The main question in this paper is, what is Confucius' view on the 5 constant virtues? This paper only limits the book of Confucius. This paper only limits to the book of Confucius entitled The Analects, which is also supplemented by different secondary sources. The first part of this paper will discuss the background of Confucius and the 5 constant virtues in general. The second part of the paper will be an exposition of the 5 constant virtues. Then the third part of the paper will be a brief discussion on the notion of gentleman, the end of the 5 constant virtues. The end, I think what the author means by that is the goal of the 5 constant virtues. The last part is the conclusion of the paper. Okay. Chinese philosophy, so part 1. Chinese philosophy for its ethical and Chinese philosophy is famous for its ethical and moral teachings. Indeed, it is. The basic aim of Chinese philosophy has been primarily that of understanding the world, but the basic aim of Chinese philosophy has not been primarily that of understanding the world, but that of making people great. Being great has a double aspect in Chinese thought. First of all, it involves inner greatness, which is a magnitude of spirit reflected in the peace and contentment of the individual in his or her completeness. Wow, I like that. I'm going to read that again, just because I like it, and it's powerful. First of all, referring to being great has a double aspect in Chinese thought. First of all, it involves inner greatness, which is a magnitude of spirit reflected in the peace and contentment of the individual in his or her completeness. Boom. Second, it involves outer greatness, which is manifested in the ability to live well practically, that is, dignifying the social context of one's ordinary day-to-day existence. Chinese philosophy, then, is much more concerned on human conduct and social relations rather than questioning the world and other beings, just like the ancient Western philosophers who inquired regarding the basic stuff of the world. Chinese philosophy wanted their philosophy to be practical or applicable to their everyday life, everyday living. I also like that as well, and it's very true. One of the most prominent and notable traditions in the history of Chinese philosophy was Confucianism. Confucianism has taken a commanding role throughout the history of Chinese philosophy. As its name reads, and there's a note, you'll be able to, any of the notes, I'm not going to read through the notes. I'm just going to, you can see on the screen, but there's a note there after that sentence. As the name reads, Confucianism was founded by Confucius. He is considered to be China's most famous teacher, philosopher, and political theorist, whose ideas have profoundly influenced the civilizations of China and other East Asian countries. Yes, indeed. Confucius' ethical philosophy is fundamentally a humanistic social philosophy. It is all about the human beings and their society rather than about the nature or about the knowledge of nature. Interesting. So probably that's maybe more what the naturalistic Taoism was about. Was about nature and about the knowledge of nature, whereas Confucianism, the Tao, the Tao, that this the Taoic Confucianist tradition was more about humanistic social philosophy, about the human realm, as it were, as we say in Buddhism. So it's very much about the human realm. It is about our realm. There are four books. There are four books which were associated to Confucius, namely The Great Learning, the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Mencius, and the Doctrine of the Mean. Among these books, it is the Analects, or assorted sayings, which is the most prominent and the most important in Confucian thought. Accordingly, this book accurately represents the original teachings of Confucius. The later thinkers described this work as having been compiled by first and second generation disciples of Confucius and then transmitted privately for centuries, making it the oldest stratum of extant Confucius sources. That is why the Analects of Confucius is considered to be the primary vehicle for the original thought of China's premier philosopher. It was written down by his followers from their recollections and some decades after his death. It records conversations with his students and advice to rulers. The ethical ideal of Confucius and the Analects can be condensed or capitalized or capsulized into a single complex proposition. The gentleman follows the way, capital W, the gentleman follows the way of self-cultivation of virtue. Those are all capitals, capital W for way, capital S for self-cultivation, and capital V for virtue. So I read that again. The gentleman follows the way of self-cultivation of virtue, observance of the rites, devotion to learning, and public service. And that's what the author here is saying, that the Analects of Confucius can be condensed or capsulized into a single complex proposition. And that was it. According to the Analects, accordingly, in the Analects, the five most important virtues are produced. These virtues are known to be the five constant virtues, or Wu Chang. There is a diverse plethora of values in Confucianism that branch off the five constants. These virtues are widely regarded as the main principles of Confucianism, and all are interconnected in one way or another. The five constant virtues are the Ren, or benevolence, Yi, or righteousness, Li, or propriety, Ji, or wisdom, and Zin, or trustworthiness. These virtues are the fundamental values needed bear with me a sec. These virtues are widely regarded as the main principles of Confucianism and are interconnected in one way or another. The five constant virtues are the Ren, or benevolence, Yi, or righteousness, Li, or propriety, Ji, or wisdom, and Zin, or trustworthiness. These virtues are the fundamental values needed in order to live a moral life. So the basic fundamental values needed to live a moral life, kind of rings of why Shinran and Renyo would have pointed us toward these. They're the basics. So not that the goal of Jodo Shinshu is to live a moral life. It's it's to be saved by Amida. It's to have Amida through his power of his vow give us his mind of Shinjin, his true mind in Shinjin, so that we can, when at the end of this life, we can be born into the Pure Land and immediately become a Buddha, and then come back to help save other beings through Amida's power. So, but you can see why they pointed us in this direction for the guidelines. The 5 constant virtues were important in determining who was a true gentleman in ancient Chinese society. Regardless of a person's class or social status, he was expected to exhibit the 5 virtues and to use proper conduct toward others. This also applied in the way in which rulers were expected to govern. A leader from local bureaucrat to emperor was supposed to govern with benevolent concern for the well-being of his subjects. One reason those in charge were expected to live by the 5 constant virtues is that the Confucian concept of government involves leading by example. The belief was that if individuals in the government are virtuous, their subjects will also be virtuous. If only these were applied today in government and in this manner and with this kind of values. And there was something else I wanted to kind of say about this. Oh yeah, the idea of gentleman. When it says gentleman here, it's Junzi, I think, and it does. I don't think it means gentleman in the way that we would commonly kind of think of the word gentleman in the West, as kind of the sort of gentleman with from certain class or certain manners and certain or even aristocratic or what have you. This, I think it's gentleman as in gentleman, as in whatever level or strata of society you are in, you can be. The idea was that you can, through the application of Confucian teachings and the application of these 5 fundamental virtues, can be a gentleman, but not necessarily of that of a social status. So that it's more of a status of it's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Character. It's more of a character than anything that's points to some kind of social status as a gentleman, or it's a it's about their character. It's about their inner and their inward life and their outward behavior. And that basically the Confucian idea was that at every level of society, there was a way to be this for whatever your role was or relationship was to people or your social strata. Anyway, so the phrase he's an officer and a gentleman, that kind of you're an officer and a gentleman. It's kind of, it's about their character. It's about what they it's what they bring to society, to their relationships, to other people, anyway. So enough of my commentary. All right. The five constant virtues provided a lasting contribution in the moral, social, and political life of China. Although they all solely came from Confucianism, they are widely acknowledged all over China. To become a moral person, the ancient Chinese cultivated and monitored themselves according to the five constant virtues and carried them down into modern life. The five constant virtues then play a major role throughout the land of China and throughout the history of China. The second part of this paper will carefully discuss and explicate each of the Confucian virtues so as to have a clearer and better understanding on these Confucian concepts. The third part of this paper will briefly discuss the end of the five constant virtues, the formation of gentlemen. So the goal, I think it says the end, as in the goal of the five constant virtues is the formation of gentlemen, the creation of gentlemen, or junzi, I think is the Chinese term, but I could be wrong on that. Okay, part two. So starting with Ren. The Ren, or Gen, is considered to be the nucleus of all teachings of Confucius. This word consists of multiple meanings such as benevolence, humanity, human-heartedness, goodness, or love. Ren is considered to be the foundational virtue of Confucianism. Ren had originally meant the handsomeness or bearing of the young virtuous warrior. Confucius transformed it into the upright of the junzi. There we go. Confucius transformed it into the uprightness of the junzi, or gentleman or superior person, who influences others toward ethical action with the example of his excellence, Day. Whenever Day comes up in this, I think of the Tao Te Ching, you know. Anyway, so according to Confucius, being such a gentleman does not require a high social rank, a fine appearance, or an eloquent manner of speech. Rather, it requires that one embody goodness in one's relationships with others. That's sort of speaking to what I was commenting about just a little bit ago. The concept of Ren reflects presuppositions that are characteristic of Confucian philosophical anthropology, philosophical reflection on human nature, that is. Confucians have historically viewed each person not as a morally autonomous individual, but as a social being whose identity derives from his interaction with and conduct within the broader human community. Kind of, again, coming back to, perhaps Confucius was a Buddha or a Bodhisattva or enlightened being in disguise. This kind of teaching kind of reflects some Buddhist thinking and teaching, about the interconnectedness of all things and the relations of all things, and karmic relations, and so on and so forth. Indra's net, comes to mind, but in the teachings of the Buddha. But anyway, so Confucians have historically viewed each person not as a morally autonomous individual, but as a social being whose identity derives from his interaction with and conduct within the broader human community. The person who exhibits Ren exemplifies the ideal of what a human being should be and encourages others to strive toward it. In fact, the word is homophonous. In fact, the word is homophonous with the word for human being, Ren. Oh, interesting. Yeah. The concept of Ren, as mentioned above, has been interpreted in different ways, some of them partially expressed in English renderings, such as goodness, benevolence, and love. All of these interpretations, however, share two notions. Every human being has the capacity to possess Ren, and Ren manifests itself when a virtuous person treats others with humaneness. According to Confucius, Ren is what makes human beings uniquely human. The English translation, human-heartedness, suggests that Ren is what makes us human, that it is a matter of feeling as well as thinking. Ren is the foundation of all human relationships. Furthermore, by the translation human-heartedness, this reveals the Chinese emphasis on the heart rather than the mind as being as the defining quality of human nature. Man then possesses the heart of a human. A humane heart will lead man towards the authenticity of his being. The English saying, the British saying, hearts and minds comes to mind when I'm reading this. However, Confucius did not really give a formal definition of Ren. In his sayings, Li Yu, Confucius never gives a clear definition of Jen. Accordingly, this reflects his understanding of humanity, which is for him highly personal. The way of humanity lies within each human being and must be realized in one's personal life. Very wise. When one makes an absolute and objective characteristic or feature of the way of human, sorry, let me start that sentence again. When one makes an absolute objective and when one makes an absolute and objective characteristic or feature of the way of humanity would result to the distortion of Jen. I am not sure, just going to read that as it is. I'm not sure what it's sort of saying, but when one makes an absolute and objective characteristic or feature of the way of humanity would result to the distortion of Jen. No idea what that's saying. Just the sentence structure there. I'm just not sure. I'm just not getting it. Anyway, hence Ren is highly subjective. Hence Ren is highly subjective. It depends. It depends from person to end person and through personal realization. Hence, Ren is highly subjective. That is, depends from person to end person and through personal realization. Again, not sure here of the sentence structure. It's not a criticism. I'm just not getting what that's trying to say, really. I think it's trying to say Ren is highly subjective. That is, it depends on, person to person or through personal, or it depends on personal realization. However, Confucius gave his followers a glimpse on the understanding of Jen so as to help them realize its meaning in their own lives. One of the assertions of Confucius on Ren is that it is man's ability to love, the core of humanity. It is also said that Jen is considered to be the ultimate guide of human action. It is a sense of human dignity, of human life, a feeling of humanity towards others, and self-esteem for yourself. Accordingly, the true human never departs himself from the way of Ren. One who departs from Jen is not expressing the fullness of humanity. Indeed. I think here in these times in Mappo, we have departed very far from Ren, unfortunately, in many, many ways. Jen then is necessary towards achieving the fullness of humanity. The Analects read, quote, quote, wealth and honor are what every man desires. But if they have been obtained in violation of moral principles, they must not be kept. Poverty and humble stations are what every man dislikes, but if they can be avoided only in violation of moral principles, they must not be avoided. If a superior person, if they can be avoided only in violation of moral principles, they must not be avoided. If a superior person departs from humanity, Jen, how can he fulfill that name? If a superior man never abandons humanity, Jen, even in the lapse of a superior man never abandons humanity, even for the lapse of a single meal. In moments of haste, he acts according to it. In times of difficulty and confusion, he acts according to it. The quotation above stresses that Jen will make man fully human. It is then clear how important Ren is to the Confucian thought. Furthermore, it is said that a life without Ren would not be worth living. Someone who is wise or a true scholar would do nothing to endure Ren or Jen. It is Ren that makes life worth living. This may perhaps be contrasted to the thought of Socrates about how to live a worthy life. In the Socratic sense, life should conscientiously be examined in order to make it a worthy one. Confucius, on the other hand, associated a worthwhile life with the observance of Ren. Remember that Ren is what makes us truly human, to realize the being of human beings. When one abandons Ren, he is giving up his fully human life. Jen is worth sacrificing one's life for. Jen is worth sacrificing one's life for. That it is the basis of all human value and worth. It is ultimately Jen that makes life worth living. And there was something back here when it says makes us truly human, to realize the being. Remember that Ren is what makes us truly human, to realize the being of human beings. And you hear that when someone is a monster, or they're an animal, it's because they've given up what makes us human. So yeah, that's going right to the heart of that. But Confucius in the Analects said, quote, if one takes Ren away from a Junzi, wherein is he worthy of name? There is no interval so short that the Junzi deviates from Ren. Though rushing full tilt, it is there. Though head over heels, it is there. It's the very fabric, of a Junzi, Ren. The very operating system, if you like, it sounds like. Or shot through his whole psyche and nature and body and mind and heart. Accordingly, Ren manifests itself in the inner mind in love and compassion for people and in avoiding harm or envy towards others. Ren is reflected on the golden rule of Confucius, saying, "Do not do unto others what you would not wish they should do unto you." That's what I was saying earlier today. Do not do unto others what you would not wish that they should do unto you. That's what I was trying to say. Confucius was the Confucius saying earlier. Just as man treats himself as a human being through love, this should be extended to how he treats the other agents. In Ren, the person spares no effort to help and love others. One even lays down one's life for the sake of this end, with no thought of being repaid. The Confucian virtue of Ren is somehow a form of authentic love, the love for yourself and the love for others. This kind of love has the power to sacrifice oneself for the sake of others. That is why Ren is one of the most important virtues to be cultivated in human life. Li. The next Confucian virtue is Li. Just like Ren, Li also has multiple English translations. It is often rendered as ritual, proper conduct, or propriety. Originally, Li denotes court rites performed to sustain social and cosmic order. Interesting. The Confucians, however, reinterpreted it into a formal social roles and institution that, in this view, the Analects abstracted from cosmic model to order communal life. So it's coming from it's order abstracted from the cosmic order toward communal life, toward society, toward civilization. From customary patterns, Li came to mean conventional norms, yielding a new concept of an internalized code of civility that defined proper human conduct. It may also mean religion, the general principle of the social order, the entire body of social, moral, and religious practices taught and rationalized by Confucius. It further means ritual and ceremony, a system of well-defined social relationships with definite attitudes toward another, just like love in the parents, filial piety in the children, respect in the younger brothers, friendliness in the elder brothers, loyalty among friends, respect for authority among subjects, and benevolence in rulers. Moreover, it means a moral discipline in personal conduct and propriety in everything. Li then is very much broad to define. Li then is very much broad to define in a single word. However, to understand better the broadness of this notion, it is necessary to carefully look at the historical understanding of Li. Accordingly, there are three classifications or stages of understanding the notion of Li. The earliest notion of Li is religious, where it is concerned with the rites of religious performances. It soon came to denote other rituals like marriage and military and government festival. This understanding of Li coincides with a more or less elaborate set of rules and conventions, which demands a particular observation in carrying out various activities which are mainly religious or social in character. The second notion of Li refers to the customary code of social conduct, the customary code of social behavior. In this kind of understanding, Li is a customary law or common morality. It takes in a form of a written law, but in a positive sense. It takes in a form of written law, but in a positive sense. That is, it is more on what should be rather than what should not be. The third notion of Li is viewed in its conformation to the norms of humanity, or Ren. This is the most important notion of Li since it highlights Ren. However, all those meanings of Li are closely related to each other. They all refer to acts which are public and ceremonial, and acts which constitute the important rituals of life. It is then a devotion to rites and ceremonies. And that other bit there, where it says the acts which constitute the important rituals of life, has a ring of the notion, and all of this kind of social provide has a ring of the notions of rites of passage. The rites of passage in individuals' life at different stages of life. Anyway, this would somehow apply to that. Okay. The best of these practices is the concrete embodiment and expression of Jen or Ren in the past, and therefore serve as the guide to its realization in the present. I just need to stand up, folks, for a second, and over here, just for my back. Need to be standing up. Right. So let me just start with that last sentence. However, all the meanings of Li are closely related to each other. They all refer to acts which are public and ceremonial, and acts which constitute the important rituals of life. It is then a devotion to rites and ceremonies. The best of these practices reflect the concrete embodiment of Jen in the past, and therefore serve as a guide to its realization in the present. This is the reason why Confucius, when asked about Jen by one of his disciples named Yen Yun, said, quote, "To master oneself and return to propriety, Li, is humanity, Jen." It is clear in that, I guess that's unquote, it is clear in that statement that Confucius and Ren, benevolence. When one respects the customs and traditions of society, it is also an expression of respect to humanity. Furthermore, the Jen is the grounds of Li. That which makes Li a standard of conduct is the fact that it is in accord with Jen. Customs and traditions not in line or not in accord with Jen are not really Li. The true and authentic Li, according to Confucius, are the rules proper to actions that genuinely embody Jen. Wouldn't that be great if that was the basis of society today? Sadly not. In a lot of the world, that is, anyway. The Li should become the means whereby the individual's humanity can be invoked and developed. The Li should become the means whereby the individual's humanity can be evoked and developed. Li then should be fundamentally based on Ren or Jen. Authentic Li should rightly conform to the notion of Ren, which aims to achieve moral and social order so as for the humans to become truly humans. As what Confucius said in the Analects, quote, "In the practice of Li, harmony is the key." unquote. It's so cool how how it all, one thing flows from another. And there's such a, it just makes perfect sense. If only, if only we could apply it as he taught it. Not that I'm encouraging the practice of Confucianism as any kind of teaching or anything. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be great if it could be truly embodied and practiced? Right. And it is hard. The system itself is harmonious. It's very Taoic. It's very Tao in that sense. Li then is very much important, not only in the sense that it shows respect to the traditions or rites and ceremonies, but also that it helps to realize Ren. Confucius rather emphasized the importance of the rites in the book 8 of the Analects, which reads, quote, "Courtesy without rites is labus lost. Courtesy without rites is labus lost. Prudence without rites is timidity. Courage without rites is disorder. Honesty without rites is impatience. When gentleman cherishes his family, the people are inspired towards benevolence. Indeed, when he does not desert that of long standing, the people are not stealthy." Unquote. Interesting. I don't know if he means sneaky by that. Anyway, the next Confucian virtue is yi, or commonly translated as righteousness. Accordingly, it is the virtue of fulfilling one's duties and responsibilities to family, community, nation, and the world. It is then the act of doing what is right and good for others. Confucius said in the Analects, quote, "The superior man regards righteousness yi as the substance of everything. He practices it forth in modesty, and he carries it to its conclusion in faithfulness. He is indeed the superior man," unquote. There's an exclamation point. That's why I emphasize that at the end. The quotation above suggests that yi, or righteousness, is necessary for the formation of the superior man or gentleman, the concern of the third part of this paper. Yi informs the agents of the right way of acting under specific situations, so they will be constantly in accord with Jen or Ren. It is then both a moral disposition to do what is right and an ability to recognize what is right. Like it is a moral sense or intuition. Confucius accordingly sometimes talks of this ability in terms of person's character or uprightness. Furthermore, yi is a moral sense beyond simply following the norms or rules. It involves a balanced understanding of the situation and the creative insights necessary to apply virtues with no lost sight of the total goal. With no lost sight of the total goal. That might be a typo there. Yi represents this ideal of totality, as well as a decision-generating ability to apply a virtue properly and appropriately in a situation. Yi then is a virtue which goes beyond the simple observation of rules or laws in society. It is all about absolute righteousness. That is, following what is really right and avoiding what is really wrong. It encompasses rules, for there are some rules. It encompasses rules, for there are some rules which are morally wrong. Ye also reminds the agent to be observant or vigilant to the situation in observing virtues. It is then similar to the concept of practical wisdom proposed by the famous Western philosopher named Aristotle. In the Aristotelian sense, practical wisdom is knowing what is right, good, and best based on a given particular set of circumstances or situations. So it's, being able to do the right thing at the right time in the right place. And you have that, they tried to cultivate that ability to do that awareness, that balancing, that ability to kind of read the room, quote unquote, as it were, but in a good way, with all good intentions, with all the best intentions of everyone concerned, and act accordingly. Similar to the Confucian virtue yi, the agent should be mindful and considerate to the situation and make it as the basis in determining what is morally right and wrong. That's kind of what I was alluding to just then. Moreover, what is according to yi is unconditional and absolute. Actions must be performed for the sole reason that they are right. Yi then reminds that the agent, that the act of doing what is right and good should be solely for the very sake that it is good and no other reasons. Some human acts are done for the sake that it produces certain benefits. Like, for example, a man helps an elderly woman so that he will be rewarded with some money, or a political candidate who distributes money to citizens in order to gain some votes from them. Surely not. Those acts are not in accordance with yi, since they are done for the sake of other ends and not for the good. Remember that yi is doing right unconditionally. That is, doing right for that is what ought to be done. Let me read that again. Remember that ye is doing right unconditionally. That is, doing right, that is what ought to be done. Doing right for what that is ought to be done. Ugh. Let me try to read that one more time. I don't know if it's me or the construction of the sentences or typos or what it is, but try that one more time. I'm going to try to anyway, no. All right, so where was I? Those acts are not in accordance with ye, or the ones we just read a little bit ago, since they are done for the sake of other ends and not for the good. Remember that ye is doing right unconditionally. That is, doing right for what ought to be done, because it should, doing right because it's the right thing. What is that it ought to be done. Doing right because it ought to be done. I think that's what it's trying to say. Accordingly, this Confucian concept is also similar to Kant's ethics of duty. The actions are done as good in itself and not as a means to an end. Wouldn't it be great if we could act that way? Wouldn't it be great if more people in society could act that way at every level? Just do good, do a thing because it's the right thing. Anyway, we live in Mapo. Namo Mirabutsu. Right. Alas, we live in Mapo. And we deserve to live here because of our karmic causes. Accordingly, this Confucian concept is also similar to Kant's ethics of duty. The actions are done as a good in itself and not as a means to an end. For Kant, all humans have rational duties to one another, centering on their duty towards the good, that is, of respecting humanity. All humans must be seen as inherently worthy of respect and dignity. He argues that all moralities must stem from such duties. A duty based on here's a challenging word. Deontological? Yeah. So deontological. Here we go. He argued that all moralities must stem from such duties, a duty based on deontological ethics. Consequences such as pain and pleasure are irrelevant. Just like ye, man should do what it is ought to be done, not for the sake of other ends like benefit or utility, but for the sake of goodness itself. I'm going to read that again because, again, I think there's a typo in there. Or just like ye, man should do what man should do. Just like ye, man should do what ought to be done, not for the sake of other ends like benefit or utility, but for the sake of goodness itself. Accordingly, a person who, I think there might have been, I wonder if there's been some difficulties in translation of this. Perhaps it wasn't initially in English or something along that line, or just there's some typos. I don't know, but anyway. And again, this is no criticism of the author or the publisher or this paper at all. I'm just, and it could be just me. So I'm just trying to read it in a way that I can understand it and it can be understood. Accordingly, a person who acts for the sake of ye, because such action is the right thing to do, is not far from Jen. To practice Jen is to act out of love and respect for humanity for no other reason than it is right or is the right or humane way to act. The practice of ye then is close to the practice of Jen. This clearly shows the intimate relationship between Jen and ye, and that ye is necessary for the cultivation and formation of Ren. Again, that perfect kind of circle, the perfect interconnectedness of all of this. Again, kind of hearkening Confucius, probably a Buddha or Bodhisattva in disguise, using skillful means. Kind of, you know, think there's some indication of that. Anyway. Ji. The fourth Confucian virtue is Ji, or translated as wisdom. As rational beings, man should enrich and flourish their mind through the devotion of learning. That is why Confucius emphasized the importance of wisdom. It is an important feature of the way in which wisdom is viewed. Accordingly, the term Ji encompasses the dynamics of the thinking process, which is composed of two parts. It's sui, learning. I'm not sure my pronunciation there, speaking of pronunciation. Sui, learning, or su, thinking. Sui describes the object of knowing. Sui describes the object of the knowing process, while su describes the process of critical thinking and reflection necessary to incorporate or assimilate the knowledge acquired. Learning, then, is something which one acquires through external experience, while thinking is the internal process. That is, the ability to synthesize, criticize, compare, or incorporate certain knowledge. Confucius, however, emphasized the necessity of balancing these two. He stated that one without the other would lead to an impaired or distorted knowledge. As the book 2, article 15 of the Analects reads, quote, "To learn without thinking is labor in vain. To think without learning is desolation," unquote. It is then necessary that these two should coexist in acquiring wisdom. This saying of Confucius was further explicated by the Chinese politician Xi Jinping on his speech entitled "Wit and Vision." According to him, Confucius wanted to denote that learning without thought is pointless, and thought without learning is dangerous. He said that studying without thinking would result in being in the dark and not learning anything at all. An empty thought, on the other hand, without the basis of learning, would lead to confusion and lack of insight. Xi Jinping further associated this notion with the method of studying. Accordingly, blind study without contemplation is like having books that would lead you along by the nose without forming an opinion. On the other hand, simply thinking on one's own without studying and researching is like building a tower on a base of sand. One will gain nothing in the end. So that's a pretty good guideline when approaching the Dharma text of our Dharma masters, I think. You know, the teaching is for you alone. Teaching is for me alone, as Renyo, not Renyo, sorry, as Shinran would say. So you have to both reflect and read and take in and and kind of think about it. Anyway, so I wonder whether that actually comes into Shinran Renyo's use of these guidelines. Anyway, and I kind of do that as I'm, with these reflective readings, of this reading reflectively. That's what I'm doing. I'm reading, taking in, absorbing, but also reflecting on it and thinking about it and connecting it with, the teaching or, other things. So, okay. The only way, so here we go. Back here, where were we? Accordingly, blind study without, so Xi Jinping further associated this notion to the method of study. Accordingly, blind study without contemplation is like having books that would lead you along by the nose without forming an opinion. On the other hand, simply thinking on one's own without studying and researching is like building a tower on a base of sand. One will gain nothing in the end. The only way to gain true knowledge and wisdom is by combining studying and contemplation. Confucius then emphasized that in acquiring wisdom, man should both learn and think. He should learn from someone or something and this learning should be fully realized and understood by subjecting it to cognitive activities like analyzing, synthesizing, comparing, incorporating, and the like. Our reflection on the teachings, coming back to sort of Jodo Shinshu for a moment, our reflection on the teachings is part of deep listening. Our reading of the texts, our listening to the texts, our Dharma dialogues. It's about reflection on the teaching. It's about discussing it, making it a part of you, making it, really making it real in a sense. And it's Amita's working that does that. Amita working that enables all that and makes that happen. But reflection is a part of our deep listening, our own reflections, our own, these mental and emotional and internal activities are a part of that deep listening process that Amita enables in us. Anyway, so just reflecting on that as I'm reading this. But furthermore, Confucius said that there are 3 methods to learn wisdom. In the Analects, he said, by the 3 methods, we may learn wisdom. First, so let me just say, in the Analects, he said, quote, by the 3 methods, we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is the noblest. Second, by imitation, which is the easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest, unquote. The first one is somehow associated with thinking, while the second and the third one is somehow associated to learning. Reflection, the noblest one, makes the best understanding of unstrained subjects as one connects different concepts and then empowers one to transform it into something better. It is further like a discovery method that stimulates various insights and helps man in growing. It is further like a discovery method that stimulates various insights and helps man in growing out learning and thinking potentials. Imitation, on the other hand, is the easiest method. It is a social form of learning where one gathers from one another through observation, imitation, and modeling. It includes attention, memory, and motivation. The third one, which is experience, is accordingly the bitterest way to learn wisdom. It would be favorable yet insufficient. Experience comes with its own price, exhaustion, and pre-hypothesis. Experience comes with its own price, exhaustion, and pre-hypothesis. Confucius also has a similar view with Socrates regarding knowledge or wisdom. Concerning Socrates, Socrates, I should say, in the more Greek pronunciation. Concerning Socrates, his famous quotes say that the wisest man is he who knows that he knows nothing. It is then an acknowledgement of ignorance. Concerning Confucius, he said in the Analects, quote, knowledge is to acknowledge what is known and what is unknown as not known, unquote. Sounds a little bit rough. It's getting into Donald Rumsfeld's territory there. Known knowns, known unknowns. Sorry, couldn't resist. For Confucius, then, knowledge is not simply all about knowing things, but also knowing that there are still things that one doesn't know. It is similar to Socrates' view of the wise man. Both of them stress the importance of ignorance. It should also be noted that Confucius' notion of wisdom is not is not more on the acquisition of nature thinking. I think that should be not more focused. I'm just going to read it in a way that I'll understand it. It should also be noted that Confucius' notion of wisdom is not focused more on the acquisition of nature, of the nature of thinking, epistemology, the nature of transcendental beings, metaphysics, the nature of phenomenology, the nature of physical universe, natural philosophy. Rather, it is more focused on the acquisition of the ethical or moral knowledge. This is of no surprise, since he is fundamentally concerned with ethics. When Fan Qi, one of the disciples of Confucius, asked Confucius about wisdom, he said, quote, "To work for what is right for the people and to respect the spirit of gods from afar can be considered wisdom," unquote. From this quotation, it is clear that he is establishing a connection between wisdom, righteousness, and propriety. Wisdom is all about knowing what is right and good. Just emphasize that it is necessary that life may be ordered in such a way conducive to human welfare. Going to try to read that one again. Furthermore, Confucius emphasized that it is necessary to come to know humanity and to know what things that, I'm not sure what this is trying to say. Again, it could be an issue of translation or typos or whatnot, but furthermore, Confucius emphasized that it's necessary to come to know humanity and what things are so that life may be ordered in a way conducive to human welfare. I think you kind of get the gist of that, hopefully. This then clearly shows that the ethical nature of his wisdom, this then clearly shows the ethical nature of his view of wisdom. The most important knowledge for Confucius is the knowledge of the self rather than the knowledge of the external things, such as social conditions and institutions. Acquiring knowledge is above all knowing who and what one is, and this means knowing the principles upon which one acts. Accordingly, true knowledge is obtained only when self-knowledge, for in Confucianism, it is not. Accordingly, true knowledge is obtained only when there is self-knowledge, for in Confucianism, it is always the moral and social self that is taken as the ultimate. This notion then is somehow similar to Socrates' famous saying that an unexamined life is not worth living. It is necessary to know thyself in order to live a worthy life. They are then both stressing the importance of examining oneself. In the Confucian sense, man should strive for the knowledge of the self in order to acquire authentic wisdom. And I think I'll leave it, well, I'm almost done. Okay, I'll finish this last couple of sentences and then I'll leave it there. So Confucius' notion of wisdom is more viewed on ethical perspective. It is not more on the knowledge of the external. Confucius' notion of wisdom is more focused, is focused more on the viewing. I can't understand the way the sentence is. Confucius' notion of wisdom is more viewed on an ethical perspective. It is not more focused on the knowledge of the external things rather than the knowledge of the self and the morality.
This virtue is necessary in order to acquire Ren and for the formation of the gentleman. The book 1, article 14 of the Analects reads, quote, the gentleman does not seek to satiate himself in eating, does not seek to ease in living, is quick in his dealings and prudent in his speech, and keeps the correctness of those with the way. He can be considered as devoted to learning, unquote. So I'm just going to leave it there. We're going to go on to the next bit because I've been at this for a while. This is a good place to leave it. We go on to Zen. So thank you very much for listening. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo. Thank you very much, and take care.